Your user can be one of three things: the customer, the product, or the distribution. Knowing which one is knowing how your product and your business will actually scale. Okay, so when I work with companies, and especially in an investor fashion with startups, I always try to figure out how their product ecosystem is set up and what kind of scale we're aiming to get. The reason we want to have scale is that scale is what gives us competitive advantage, meaning better unit economics than our competitors due to an increase in size. So scale isn't just size. Everybody can get big, but it's the scale that gives the profit margins, and that's what we're after. So I have built a framework to understand the three different types of scale that I work with as an investor and advisor, and I want to share it with you. It's pretty neat, and it whiteboards pretty easily for you to sort of understand and scribble out what are we dealing with here. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so it's an acronym, and the acronym is CUPID. And CUPID stands for customers, users, product, iteration, and distribution. So these are the things that you need to sort of figure out how they work in combination. Iteration is just because I needed an I to make it CUPID, but essentially it means time, like repetition of the model over time. And then it's the other four things: the customers, the users, the product, and the distribution, that is having a relationship. And I'm going to show you what I mean. Okay, so let's do like a very base case first. Be My Eyes, it's a startup out there. They provide an app for blind people. It's free. I'm an investor, full disclosure. It's an awesome company. It's like make the world better place for real company. So it has the largest seeing impaired community in the world. And if I am blind, I just open the app, I press the screen. There's just, the whole screen is one button. And then it opens a video link to a volunteer. Anywhere in the world, they have a couple of million volunteers. And then I can point my screen at a can of tomatoes and say, hey, is this a can of tomatoes or is it a can of beans? Because I'm blind, so I can't see it. And then the person on the video link who can see says, well, it's tomatoes. And then you say, thank you, and hang up. That's it. That's the product. So the user is the blind person and the volunteer, but they don't pay. What are we going to do here? So you see, well, okay, we have 3 million volunteers and a couple of 100,000 seeing impaired. These numbers are actually old. They're way more today. So who's the customer? Right. They're not going to pay. Then the model wouldn't work. So we're building a community here, a freemium community that actually generates a lot of value, but how are we monetizing it? So we do not have a one-to-one relationship between user and customer. Any business needs customers because they pay the bills. So how do we get from the users to the customers? Well, we try and innovate, right? So what they do is they say, well, we have the users, and now we're going to build a product around that. So we're going to turn the users into a product. We're going to say, hey, you're a big corporation, Google, Microsoft, Lloyd's. These are actually their first customers. You need to have CSR, corporate social responsibility, in place in your customer success and service, because you're not serving the seeing impaired community very well today, which is a problem for this community that is large and growing. So you need to buy our software to be able to provide user support to this user group. And you're going to pay for that. And then this is where you get to the customers, which are large multinational corporations. The users are still the blind people, they're the volunteers. And then you have a smaller subset user groups who aren't actually that important because they're just the tool of the buyer. Like the buyer is actually the corporation that sees a CSR need and sees an actual customer service need and wants to buy the software, implements it, and then the value of the software is actually the user. So the user, the blind people, become the product that is then sold to the multinational corporation. Okay, so we see a relationship here between where the user is the product that then leads to the customer. Great. Let's do another example. NIME, open source data analytics platform. It's used by, they have several 100,000, if not millions, of data analysts that have downloaded their desktop versions and using their community versions to build data analytics and just geek out on that. But it's free. So, and to note here, 500,000 open source users. How do we monetize that? Well, what happens is that all the data analysts work in, you guessed it, large corporations, other businesses. And then those businesses needs data analytics. And then the guy that works there says, well, why don't we use 9? Because I use that all the time. It's free and awesome, and I like the product. So why don't we use it here at work? And then the large multinational corporations looks at the product and says, yeah, well, but we need to buy the premium version because that's safer. It had audit trails. We can control the data flows. We have all the things that we need as a large multinational company to do data analytics, integrations, faster processing speed, and so on. So now the users, all the data analysts, work as the distribution to get to the customer. So the data analysts are not the product in this instance. They're just the ones taking the product and selling it to the customer. Perfect. Okay, let's do another one. Team. I was an investor. They did in-person and virtual events, so it was an event management piece of software. COVID killed them. Great team. They're doing new things now. So what they did was they did an event management platform. So I can have an event, I can post it, I can book speakers, I can sell tickets, I can handle access to the event and so forth. Oh, great. It's great. So the first one is simply that. You take the software and you sell it to event managers. So here we have a straight line CUPID, as I call it. So the user is the customer. So we're saying, you want to do events, you buy our software, you are now the customer. Great. Simple. So if you add time to this iteration, what happens is that, well, you gain momentum. So you gain some economies of scale. The code base doesn't get incrementally more expensive the more users you put on it. So that works out. So the development and delivery costs, the cost to serve gets put in, and the customer acquisition costs gets put in to actually acquire these event managers. And then over time, that builds to generate cost of scale and an advantage there. So this is the first type of scale that we could deal with. Cost of scale. Lower costs compared to 1 unit of revenue. Okay. Now, let's take it one step further. Okay, so now I have a lot of event managers that are using my platform. And this is where the iteration takes place, where we say, well, the customers who now use the platform to produce events, they could also maybe become a product for all the venues that are looking to host the events, right? So I have maybe 200 customers in a certain geography, like whatever, Germany. And then I can say, hey, all the venues, maybe you get access to all these customers I have who are looking for venues all of the time, and you can sell your venue to them. Great. So now we have a new set of customers that are built as the product of the old customers who are also sort of the users of the first product, right? So first user group becomes the product for the second user group and customer group. So this is great. So through iteration, this doesn't happen immediately, right? So we have to build the first user group in order for that to gain some critical mass so that we can turn it into a product and sell it to the second user group. This is where we can start to use this CUPID model to map out product ecosystems, right? So what happens first? What happens next? As we iterate, we add time, we add repetitions to the system, then it builds up, and then new value emerges, right? So, and then we can say, well, the second customers, the event venues, who are now distributing to the first type of customers, actually starts to be the distribution that gets us the first event manager. So we can use the venues to actually sell the original product to the original user type, the event managers. And now we have a circular motion going on, right? So that means that whenever we add an event manager that becomes a customer, then we add a little bit more product value to the product that we sell to the venues. And then the venues actually start to market a little bit more, and that gives us more event managers, which then completes the circle on and on and on. So the iteration now is circular, meaning that we actually have scale, right? Because the more we put in, the faster the flywheel spins. We get cost of scale in the first section, which actually gives us something that I call product scaling, value scaling in the second, where it's a network effect. More and more value built in a product just by us selling it. And then it also gives us distribution scaling or sales scaling, in that we gain more and more customers, sort of which you measure it in K factor or virality. Like, check one of my other videos for that, in terms of, well, the customer acquisition costs will drop the more we build the system, right? this was the core business case that I drew up before investing into Tame. I could see, okay, if we started it here, acquiring the first user and customer base, they would build product value for the next customer base, the venues, who would then help distribute to the first customer base. So we have circularity. So any dollar invested into this could potentially compound in the system itself over time, right? So the more that you can gain some circularity where eventually you have a distribution going back to the original type of customer, and it also builds product value in and of itself, you have something that potentially can grow. You're still limited by the total addressable market and all these other things. You still need a great product. You still need product market fit at each step of this chain and so on, right? So it isn't everything, but it is doing sort of the core job of saying, hey, if this works out, will we have something that will be very hard to compete against, right? Because if this gets up and running, then my unit economics are going to be way better than anyone else's that are trying to do this space. And essentially, this can become a market dominant play. So if I own over 51% of the market, then no other competitors can go in and have better unit economics than me, because the volume now determines the unit economics, because I have all the types of scale. So why would I go anywhere else than Craigslist to buy something, or Amazon and so forth, depending on what I want to buy? Because they have all the sellers, right? They have aggregated the market. So it's really hard to compete against them because they have login effects on the network. Like they've compiled the network, aggregated that, and are selling it back. So this is the core steps of the CUPID framework. And then only one thing that I want to add to it, which is, well, where does pricing fit into all this? And essentially you can look at it like this. So pricing depends on the kind of relationship you have at each of the steps, right? So this is why I'm using this example, because it has all of them. So if you have a straight line, go from user to customer. So the user is your customer. You're selling something directly to the person that has to use it. Okay. Then you just charge a value, right? You figure out what's it worth, how much value can we deliver, and then we charge for that. And, the more customer surplus there is, like the better deal it is, the they will buy, the faster. Okay, great. Now, if you have a user base that you're turning into a product, then you probably want to make it free, right? So let's say that you told all your event managers, hey, do you want to participate in us like sending out and having venues contact you? If that isn't free, they're unlikely to say yes, right? Or it's going to be harder, because here you're actually not monetizing the user base. You're just using it as a product. What you're doing is you're monetizing the venue, right? You're saying, hey, I have something, I'm going to package it and sell it to. The more volume you can get there, the better. So you don't want to constrict the product creation. You want to free that up, and then you want to monetize the step where you go towards the customer. So again, you charge venues at value in that step. And then it actually reverses, right? So when venues now becomes your distribution, you actually want to incentivize that. So you pay your distributors. So whenever you have a downward curve, so you go from the customer or user, the distributor link, and they say, you actually want to move that faster than free, right? Faster than free. Incentivize it, use kickbacks. If you have very large community, you can also use something like gamification and other things, but you should realize that you definitely should not put up paywalls here. If people are distributing it and they're having sort of a real viral effect on your product, just let it flow, at least free. You might even want to add some gasoline to the fire and make it go even faster. So this is sort of where you see these motions, where if you have a horizontal line from user to product, just charge for value. If you have one going up where something becomes a product, you probably make it free. If you have something going down, you make it free or you even pay them, right? So it's only the step where you go to the customer that you charge. And no, these are rules of thumb. There might be all sorts of variations and different cases and industry standards and so forth that vary from that. But if you have something brand new and you just have to think about it conceptually, this at least is my starting point on some of these things. So just remember the core question. You have a user. The user can be only one of three things. They can be the product, the customer, or the distribution. Which are they? And then what happens next?